Sage Intelligence Reporting Cloud gives you a lot of flexibility when adding rows and columns to a report, ensuring that you can display the information you want to see. Over the next two videos, I'm going to show you how to work with these two features by creating a basic layout. It will give my revenue, cost of sales, and gross profit from my current and prior years to date, and will include a variance column. I've displayed the final design on screen for you to get an idea of what we'll be working towards, and in this lesson, I'm going to work through adding just the rows. In a previous video, I mentioned that there are different types of rows that can be used in a report, and this example will demonstrate how you can add each of them as well as explain their individual properties. The first is value-based items that pull in information directly from your general ledger, like the revenue, other revenue, and cost of sales rows in my report. The second is calculations, which combine other rows and values to return a result. Here they are my total revenue and gross profit. Lastly, there are text items, which can be used as either headings or separators. I'm going to start by creating a new report from my Financials folder, giving it the name Gross Profit Actual versus Prior Year to Date. I'm not going to worry about adding a logo or editing the title now, and I'm going to jump straight into adding the rows. To include my revenue and other revenue, I'm going to click Add a Set of Rows. This opens a dialog which lets you add more than one row at a time, either using individual accounts, account groups, or the group categories. By selecting each tab, the items for it are shown in the pane on the left, and by clicking each one, they are added to the preview on the right. If you want to remove a row from the preview, you can do so by clicking the X at the end of it. You can also search for items using the search bar. This can be by any of the columns shown in the left-hand pane. So, for example, as I want to include revenue accounts, I'm going to go back to the Group Category tab, choose Group Category Description from the column selector, and then type revenue into the text field. Without having to do anything else, all the group categories with revenue in the description are shown, and I can click Revenue and Other Revenue. I'm not going to include cost of sales just yet, because I want to use it to show how you can add individual rows shortly. If I click OK, the ones I've picked are placed in the rows area. I'd like to show them as a group, so I'm going to give them a heading. I can use Add a Row for this, which lets you define a single row from scratch. When I click it, a new one is added on the left, and the properties for it are shown on the right. The first field enables you to enter a name for the row, and I'm going to type Revenue. I can then select the type. This is where you decide whether you want it to be an amount, calculation, or text. And depending on your choice here, the options below will change accordingly. Since this one is a heading, I'm going to select Text. The option I'm then left with is to hide the row. This means it will not be displayed when the report is run. I'm not going to worry about checking this, but in case you're wondering, it could be used if you wanted to include notes in your design, but not have them show up in the final rendering. I can then click OK. I'd like my title to be placed above the other two rows, and as I'm sure you recall, I can just drag it into place. I'm now going to add the row to work out my total revenue, and I'm going to use Add a Row again for this. I'm going to enter the name Total Revenue, and this time select Calculation as the type. If I then click on the next field, a calculator appears. It lists all value-based rows that have been added to the layout so far, and you can use them together with the buttons on the right to build up the function you want. Also note that if you have a lot of rows included, you can use the search field to easily find specific ones. For my formula, I'm simply going to add my revenue and other revenue together and click OK. I'm then given the options Show as Percentage and Hide Row. Show as Percentage will display the values in the row as percentages, and Hide Row, like before, will hide it when the report is run. In this case, hiding a row may be useful. For example, if it is needed in another calculation, but you don't want it to be seen in the final version. I'm now going to add my cost of sales, and I'm going to use add a row one more time. I'm going to call it cost of sales, and this time leave the type as amount. Then for row identification, I can select whether I want it to be at the account, account group, or account group category level. If I leave it as account group or group category, a drop-down list of the available groups or categories appears, and I can select the one I want. My cost of sales is an account group, so I'm going to select account group and then select cost of sales from the drop-down list. The next options are more advanced ones. When you add an individual account, the Include This Row option enables you to show or hide rows based on whether they have debit or credit balances for a particular period. You then have the ability to switch the sign of an account. Reverse sign is typically used on credit accounts whose balances are stored as negative values in the underlying data, but which you want to show as positive values in a report. Because cost of sales is a debit account, I don't need to worry about selecting this, but I do want to select it for revenue and other revenue. I'm sure that by now you're familiar with hiding a row, so I'm going to click OK and go back to revenue and other revenue to change them. The next row I want to add is the calculation for my gross profit. This time, instead of using add a row, I'm going to make use of a shortcut, which is add a calculation. This will open up the row calculator directly, and I can determine the result by subtracting cost of sales from total revenue. After clicking OK, you can see the row placed in the area with its properties shown. All I have to do now is give it a more meaningful name. Before finishing off, I want to insert some spaces to neaten things up. I could do this by adding individual text rows and leaving their titles blank, but I'm going to use add a space instead, which will do this automatically. After inserting a few, I can drag them into position. My rows are now complete, and the last thing I want to do is save them as a quick add. So I'm going to select the area and then Quick Add Rows from the task pane. I can then click on Save Current Rows as Quick Adds. You're required to enter a name for them, and you can also enter a description, which is optional. I'm going to call mine Gross Profit Rows. After clicking OK, the set is added to the list, ready to be used again if I need them. You can also delete a set you've saved by clicking the X on the right of it. You should now have a handle on the different rows you can add to a layout, the different ways you can add them, their properties, as well as saving them for reuse. In the next lesson, I'll continue in the same fashion, adding my columns to the report. To view other videos in this series, go to youtube.com/sageintelligence. Also, connect with us at sageintelligence.com and sageintelligencecommunity.com. And if you'd like to brush up on your Excel skills, check out our online courses at sageintelligenceacademy.com. Lastly, we love feedback, so if you found this lesson useful, please like it and share it on your social media channels.